without further ado, really excited to have John Pasmore here, who's going to talk about AI in education. John Pasmore is a seasoned entrepreneur with a deep background in media, technology, and business. As the founder and CEO of Latimer.ai, excuse me, he launched an inclusive large language model focused on delivering accurate historical information and bias-free interaction, particularly for Black and Brown audiences. Latimer.ai is unique in its approach, using licensed content from esteemed sources, such as its exclusive partnership with New York Amsterdam News to ensure data accuracy and promote equitable economic sharing among content creators and owners. The platform is built on a retrieval augmented generation model, offering significant advances over other traditional large language models. Back in the day, John was the president of Russell Simmons One World, where he created a magazine/media platform with hip hop pioneer Russell Simmons. He pivoted on an entrepreneurship journey, which began in 2007 when he co-founded Voyage TV, a venture-backed video-based travel platform that raised $10 million in an A round led by Centcom Venture Partners. Voyage TV was successfully sold to Next One Interactive in 2013. In addition to his work at Latimer.ai, John has held leadership positions at TRS Capital, Movida Organics, and Trace TV. He also serves on the board of directors of Outward Bound USA. John holds a BS in Business Administration from State University of New York, and then later, as an adult, he returned to education and earned a BA in Computer Science from Columbia University. He also has a certificate in Machine Learning from Cornell University. His work with Latimer.ai, which is named after the inventor Lewis Latimer, which I am thankful for, because in Atlanta it gets a little hot. That's what they call it, Hotlanta. Latimer developed a forerunner of the air conditioner called Apparatus for Cooling and Disinfecting. So when things heat up in the summertime, think Latimer. So when John named his company after this amazing inventor, Latimer, this really reflects his dedication to addressing bias and AI while creating more inclusive technology solutions. John, so great to have you here today to share your insights with us.
It's great. Thank you so much. Great to be here. I happen to be in Washington, D.C. today, so just let me know if there's any issue with my internet, and maybe we can change things around. But thank you, Dr. Washington, for that introduction. So given the intro, I don't need to spend a lot of time on my background. I will say that my time at Columbia University really kind of informed me about where we thought the landscape was with artificial intelligence. I think when OpenAI launched, a lot of folks, even professor level people, were surprised at the capabilities that we were seeing being deployed, because we thought generally, and we can argue about whether this type of AI is doing any kind of reasoning or actual thinking, or if it's just math. But we were still surprised at the capabilities, the generative capabilities of this technology to create novel or new texts, or now we see images and videos. So it's really powerful. And I think the next thing that we saw that was kind of troubling was based on the training data that essentially all the large language models, whether that was coming from OpenAI or Google or others, those were exhibiting bias, and in some cases were kind of insulting people asking questions with the query responses. And there's also just kind of inaccuracies, particularly about Black and Brown history and culture. So we looked at that as an opportunity to create something new that can solve for those particular problems. As Dr. Washington mentioned, we created a RAG model, which basically means that we have our own database that sits on top of a foundation model. We are in the process also of training up our foundation model, but we sit on top of a foundation model currently In the Latimer environment, that's OpenAI, whether it's 4.0 mini or 4.0. Consumers in our application can choose which one they want to use. Plus the Latimer database, which gives very different perspectives. And I'm just going to share my screen and we can kind of walk through this. When I say it gives very different answers, I'm just going to use an example that we very often use when we're talking to potential partners. When you go to ChatGPT and you say, well, who are our most important artists? The machine essentially has to resolve what do we mean by our, because it's kind of then you're including the machine in this query. So the response that ChatGPT gives is, well, our most important artists are Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Vincent van Gogh, Pablo Picasso, Rembrandt. And, you're kind of noticing, well, these are kind of not a very diverse set of folks, kind of European. We're not seeing anybody from Africa or African descent or Indian or Chinese for that matter. So when we come to Latimer and we ask a similar question, we kind of expand it a little bit. But in the visual arts, you're getting a different bias. So, I happen to be with Jan LeCun, who leads the AI efforts at Meta, earlier this week, and he gives a talk about all AI has some form of bias. I would say that in the ChatGPT and the other major models that we see, it's generally going to be what I'd call a Western culture bias. The same as I went to Columbia University. You take classes there like the history of Western art, and it's very focused on, hey, our civilization kind of came through Europe. I mean, that's part of how part of the educational system in outside of HBCUs, I would say, in the United States, and then that's reflected in ChatGPT. Right. So we have a very different bias than ChatGPT. And then one of the things that you think has to be, you have to be careful of is, so the model kind of has this self-image, right? That these are the most important artists, and you can replace artists with scientists or other categories, and you'll see somewhat similar responses. What becomes troubling is then, now we see ChatGPT being used in hospitals, in policing. So, if the model itself thinks that, the people of European descent are the most important people, how does that show up in, when law enforcement uses this application? Or how does it show up maybe in a very subtle way, right? When a hospital is using this, if a hospital is using some sort of AI to triage what happens in the emergency room, how is it triaging folks? Who's the most important person? Is it the most injured person? Or is there some possibility that it's got this kind of inherent bias? So, those are things we want to be careful of with AI. And I'm just going to kind of go through some of how we think about artificial intelligence. And I believe that we'll have some opportunity for questions and answers at the end. So Latimer, our parent company is FutureSum AI. And, just to kind of back it up a little bit, like, what is AI? So generally we think of it as the simulation of human intelligence by machines. And again, when I was at Columbia not that long ago, we looked at AI, or this kind of almost human seeming AI, as being maybe decades away. And now you have both OpenAI and Meta have changed their mission statement to not just be using AI, but their mission is to create something called artificial general intelligence, or AGI. So that is and AGI is almost indistinguishable if they were able to do it. Nobody's been able to do it, but it is, again, their mission. They're spending billions of dollars on this. AGI would be basically indistinguishable from a human. But when you think about these machines, you also think about, well, what if a human could read and remember and recall everything that it read, and it read everything that was on the internet? That would be a very special type of entity. So that's, that's maybe down the road a bit. We don't know. We don't know how far away AGI or OpenAI or Meta is from AGI. I would think that Jan LeCun at Meta feels that, that it's some years away. But we just don't know. And then generative AI is this, we've had AI in many different forms for many years. So whether that's the recommendation engine, which maybe is, machine learning is considered a subset of artificial intelligence. So, somehow, Amazon can guess or suggest to you, hey, you bought this, maybe you'd like this, or Netflix could say, hey, from our looking at your behavior, we think that you would like these movies. That's a form of AI as well. So we've all been living with AI, and now we're seeing it be further embedded in, whether we look at Instagram or what have you. This is an interesting article that speaks to what we're doing. As a young company, as an entrepreneurial company, we're a for-profit company. We're out talking to VCs and other young companies about how we're going to use AI. Specifically, initially, really, we see the opportunity in education. And this is an interesting article in The Economist that many people wouldn't have guessed, but that, it speaks about the fact that Black and brown parents are embracing AI faster than their white counterparts. I'm not reproducing the whole article here, obviously, but you can Google that. It's an interesting perspective. Black and brown people have a long history of being early adopters, and for whatever reason, with AI, it wasn't expected by most of the people that I talked to that this would occur. And what's wrong with AI? So this is a Stanford University paper, and it speaks to the slippery slope here that, again, when you're the model is only as informed as its training data allows it to be. And, what we've seen with many of the big companies, Amazon, Meta, Google, so on, is that their hiring has been somewhat really honestly troubling, right? So we've seen that they're able to get maybe 2% of their workforce is Black or brown. And it's been stuck there really for decades, and now you even see, companies like Microsoft that are kind of walking back their commitment to DEI. Hopefully that doesn't gather any steam, and we're heading into an important election, which perhaps can change the trajectory of that. But I think you need Black and brown engineers who are going to be more sensitive to these issues, or you're going to have models that really don't have a lot of diverse data that's informing how they're going to interact, which could be, in this paper that talks about the health impacts or healthcare impacts about that. And certainly even in education, there's a slippery slope there. So, our mission is to fill that void. It's been really interesting. Certainly appreciate the attention and adoption from HBCUs, whether that's Miles College or Morehouse, or working with Morgan State. So a lot of attention. I was recently at Claflin University, so there's a lot of attention in how do we use AI within education, and answering the question, right? So the most obvious question is, it makes it very simple to potentially use AI irresponsibly. Hey, I have a paper due, it's due tomorrow, I don't have a lot of time, I'm going to use this tool to maybe speed up the process. And so that's that's the issue. And different educational institutions are approaching that in different ways. Some are embracing AI, and some are kind of holding it out at arm's length and still using software like Turnitin that can maybe, they say it's 99% accurate in determining whether a paper or some other content was produced using AI. And I'm going to skip through some of this and talk about, we published a white paper, and we gave each model, and we'll continue to update this. We gave each model 100 queries, and then we were just looking at the language that it was using to answer those queries. And we see that there's, what we had to go out and prove as a young company, that there's really a definitive difference between what we're doing and what other models and how they're generating content, how we're generating content. So our white paper, and I'm happy to circulate that after this presentation, and it's on archive, so it's published on the internet, shows definitively that there's a definite difference in the language that we use and the language that ChatGPT and really all other models are using as it relates to race, gender, and particularly in social class. And, at this point, what we've done is we've brought a couple of different versions of what we do to market. So we have an interface that certainly anybody can go to on the internet at latimer.ai. We've worked with different colleges where, hey, maybe if you have a miles.edu email, you can use Latimer for free because our institution has a relationship with Latimer. And we're looking to expand that across the board. Again, we work really closely with the United Negro College Fund. We'd like to make our tool available to everybody, because even if it's, I think what people will end up doing is using several tools. We're not saying that we are the only tool that you should use with AI. We're just saying that, as a more inclusive voice, that Latimer would be valuable in a lot of the work that you're creating. Also, we have an API, and some folks here would know what that is. It's just a way, let's say, for our machine to talk directly to another machine. So, for instance, a lot of people are familiar with the learning management system, Canvas or Blackboard. So we can talk directly to Canvas if a school just says, hey, can we just embed Latimer into Canvas? That gives maybe administrators and faculty kind of a better look, let's say, at how students are interacting with AI. Did the student, come in and start their paper a week before it was due, or did they start it this morning? Obviously, that's problematic. Again, we want to focus on responsible use of AI, but it's such a powerful tool that I have a teenager at home. It's a little tempting to lean on it maybe, and a little bit too much. That's particularly, I think, in terms of how we're seeing it develop. We're seeing issues, particularly, English and math are kind of the two core topics. It's dead simple, to go to AI and say, hey, I would like to write an essay on James Baldwin, and I need it to be 5 paragraphs, and I need it to be 2,000 words. So it's really easy to use the tool irresponsibly. And, we understand that, but we want to make sure that people are learning, so that the problem is, the machine, let's say, can create an essay without any grammatical errors. So how does a person learn grammar? And the same is true for programming. We're seeing in code writing now that these tools are very powerful, and using a voice prompt, you can almost build any piece of software and have it maybe test it and debug it. When I learned coding in certain classes for certain tests, we were required to just bring a pencil and a piece of paper, and when we walked into the test, the professor would kind of write on the board what what the code was or what the project was that we were supposed to code. And then with again, a piece of paper and pencil, you had to kind of code up that program. So there was it basically, you had to know everything about how your code would interact and where you might create errors, at least in that practice. And there's so many tools now, including AI, where you could just ask it to write the code. And you're kind of skipping over, it's the same as in English, right? You're skipping over that phase where you have to find your errors, and then you learn, oh, this is an infinitive, this is how I make something possessive, or this is where I'm forgetting, a colon in my code. And so the question is, if you never really have to learn those things, what happens down the road? So we believe that we can help educational institutions achieve learning outcomes. We're seeing in certain institutions where instead of, let's say, assigning an essay, schools are saying, hey, bring your drafts or bring your prompts to class, and we're going to discuss, the prompts that you're choosing. And that way, the instructor or professor can get an idea of, what is your domain knowledge about this topic? What are you bringing to the topic? What's your perspective on the topic? And then come back, at some later date with a draft created from your prompts so that we can discuss it again in class. Because AI makes it so easy to just create the final product. The idea is that you have to bring some of the work back to an in-class discussion where it's up to the instructor also to understand what each student knows or doesn't know about the topic, because it may not be as apparent in the final product anymore where they're landing with that topic. That's the case. This is a screenshot that I like to share from Miles College, where the provost is talking to instructors in particular about how they want, or how they're suggesting that instructors use Latimer in the classroom. And it's just as I talked about, and it really becomes in some ways an additional step for instructors to really interact with students, to understand what it is they understand about the assignment and the topics. We have some partnerships outside just to kind of talk about what Latimer is able to do outside of education just a bit. This is just a fun piece of technology that a healthcare company is using. They have a call center that is basically interacting with Black and brown folks in different geographies, and they're using Latimer to create those call center scripts. So they just punch in the phone number. Latimer creates a script that call centers can use because, again, number one, your average call center person might be a college student, but generally college grads are not working in call centers. So you have folks that are maybe not super savvy in terms of the healthcare journeys of Black people. And the software can at least create an outline or create the initial conversation that call center representative would have with Black and brown people. And for you data scientists out there, where the healthcare companies have tremendous data on basically every person in the United States. In our first instance here, for everybody that we're calling, they have 1,000 attributes on that person. And in some cases, it would be 2,000 data points on every individual. So you can imagine, there's big data companies like Axiom. So I'm sure, let's say everybody listening to this conversation, that Axiom probably has about 2,000 data points on you. And some of that is things that you might not expect maybe it's not purely public, but if you shop at CVS or if you use MasterCard or Visa, in many cases they have quite a bit of your buying history, and in some cases, let's say a healthcare company might say, well, this person said that they're 100% healthy, but in their purchasing data, we're seeing that they're buying a lot of maybe even over the counter pain medication. So maybe there's an undiagnosed issue. They're buying Robitussin on a weekly basis. We may not share that information, or your healthcare provider may not share it, but they have access to it. And they say, well, there might be an undiagnosed healthcare issue, and that might affect that person's ability to get insurance. It might affect their insurance premium. It might affect what happens when they walk in the hospital. So there's a very slippery slope there in terms of privacy, and that's a whole other data conversation that we could have. This is a letter that, again, Moss was one of our early adopters in using AI. So we were very happy about that. And the provost there kind of shared their thinking with both the staff and students. And again, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I'm sure a lot of folks here are looking at being entrepreneurs. This just goes to talk a bit about how we've launched the business. So we have kind of a hybrid model in that Latimer is available to any consumer. Any consumer can go to the website and just sign up. So we kind of have a B2C and a B2B strategy. We're mostly focused initially on creating relationships with institutions. Those are generally education institutions at this point. And this is just a bit of a dissection of what I already showed when I briefly went to Latimer, the website. And one of the new features that we're launching next week is speech to text. So you could just talk to Latimer in the same way, almost that you would kind of talk to Siri or Alexa and get your questions answered. And just to take a step back, it was mentioned, Dr. Washington mentioned that we use this retrieval augmented generation format, architecture, and generally called a RAG, has specific benefits for us. For a lot of educational institutions, we're trying to work with educational institutions because we can put, when we talk about that extra database in the RAG, that database can sit behind the institution's firewall if necessary. Because let's say Morehouse wanted to include course descriptions or things that are specifically interesting to Morehouse students, or Morehouse may have documents in their library that would bequeath to Morehouse, or maybe Morehouse purchased certain library materials, and we can build a version of Latimer or help an institution build a version of their own LLM where that data that needs to be just for their institution can sit behind their firewall, but still that students can interact with it using an LLM, which is great. It's a very easy interface. Number one, kind of started off like Google, where you could simply enter your query, and now it's really moving for the folks that are comfortable with it. Just you can just talk to it if that's how you want to interact. I'm going to kind of pause there. I do see that we have a couple of maybe questions or comments. Did we want to jump into those?
Yeah, that sounds great. That was amazing. There's a couple of questions, and we'll dive into the first question because I think Tommy is wrapping up the poll, so we can
Okay.
share the poll results. Oh, there they are. So what I'm going to do is to read out of the poll results, and then we'll pivot to the questions. Y'all can put them in the chat or Q&A, and we'll find them. And so first it says, what is your status? We have about 84% who are graduated working professional, 16% who are currently enrolled students. It looks like the students are seniors and graduate students. And of course, we're all lifelong learners. And for identified genders, we have 53% females, 47% males. And where do folks live? Interesting. We have 51% from Georgia and 49% from elsewhere. So a nice distribution there. And so number 5 is AI market is a booming industry. By 2025, it will reach how many dollars? Is it 500 million, 900 million, 1.5 billion, or 190 billion? Well, AI market by 2025, it will reach 190 billion with a B. Yeah, dollars. So it's definitely booming in the billions. And number 6, which is a type of AI bias? Is it racism in the American healthcare system, Amazon's hiring algorithm, or other people's hiring algorithms too? Or is it depicting CEOs as purely male? Guess what? It's all of the above. And interestingly enough, it was more or less evenly distributed answers across. So thanks everybody for participating in our poll today. Fantastic. So John, somebody put in the Q&A, how secure is Latimer in avoiding jailbreaking prompts? And what is this thing called jailbreaking prompts?
Jailbreaking, it can mean different things to different people. There are a lot of guardrails that have been built into large language models. We talked about some of the training data earlier. Some of that training data includes like comments from Reddit, and I think anybody that's ever read internet comments knows that those could be way out of bounds. So that in the early iterations of OpenAI, it wasn't hard for, to continue to prompt it to the point where then it would say something, the model would say something that was very, very out of bounds, let's just say. So, there's increasing effort to have guardrails. With Latimer in particular, we have our own database. We do sit on top of a foundation model. So the foundation model has whatever guardrails that in our case, OpenAI has. But with our database, because it's a factual database, so the things that we've loaded into Latimer's database are like textbooks and dissertations and public domain court cases or Senate hearings and Amsterdam news. Even if you were to, what happened, what in jailbreaking, you're trying to get the model to say some of the things that maybe were said in YouTube comments or other places that had really objectionable language. So, within Latimer, there really is no objectionable content. We look at everything that we put into Latimer, all the data that's in our database. And, so it's not something we spend a lot of time on in terms of managing people's prompts or really looking at people's prompts. You can have the model also look at like, hey, this person has asked the same kind of version of a question. Let's say, for instance, it might be a hot topic about the Middle East. And you're trying to get it to say something bad about one group or another. So you're gonna keep prompting, so the model would keep saying, well, this is the 15th question that this person has asked, with variations around the topic. So the model can begin now to see, it's evolved enough to see that this person is just fishing for a bad response. And sometimes you'll see OpenAI will stop interacting with that person.
Interesting. Somebody asked if the recording be sent out to everyone. It's on our YouTube channel, so ask everybody to subscribe. So it'll be posted there, and it's on our Facebook page. You can like that page as well. And also, this person says, does Latimer already have sample data sets to work from for class assignments?
We have whatever, we've trained our model. If there was a specific class, I think that's, again, where we want to talk to the institution itself and say, hey, if you wanted to use Latimer for a specific class, number one, you can upload documents, but that's on a session by session basis. So if you go to Latimer and say, hey, I'm writing a paper, I'm going to upload this PDF, you can certainly do that. But I think what you're referring to is, let's say have a, a whole course outline and all the reading assignments for a course, that that's called kind of the context, right? Or a context window. So now you're uploading so much information, or you'd like to, that it exceeds what's called the context window. And we generally have to create kind of a customized version of Latimer, where then for, art history or whatever the class is, that all the documents are there. So it makes it extra easy for the students to really use it and refer to the actual reading materials for that course. We'd have to interact with the institution to do that.
Very cool. Sounds so that way it's tailored. Makes a lot of sense. Somebody asked, I was recently talking to my research mentor slash professor about embedding large language models into LMS or learning management systems. How should we go about doing that?
Well, it depends on the LMS or learning management system. We're in the Canvas playground. So Canvas is about 51% of the learning management systems in higher education. And there's D2L, we're in conversations with them, and Blackboard being the third. So I think it's really comes from them. If those are one of the learning management systems that you use, you could just ask them where they're at with embedding LLMs, and they're really all working on it already.
Fantastic. Someone says, what are some of the immediate ways students can develop their skills to become early creators of AI models, not just early adopters or users? And where does one start with coding, analytics, and so on? How do they get in the AI game?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of universities are adding courses on this topic, but there's a ton of coursework too. There's a website called deeplearning.ai that was started by the Coursera founder, Andrew Ng, that has tremendous, in most cases, free courses. I think the only time, like Coursera, the only time that you would have to pay for it is if you want, some sort of certification. But you can take the courses, and they range from, intro to Python, if that's something you'd like to learn, to, really pretty deep conversations on creating or working with models. To create a foundation model, I think the estimate, let's say the big models that Meta or Amazon or OpenAI has, that's kind of like a hundreds of millions of dollars to assemble not only the data, but the actual modeling that has to happen. Uh, so it's out of reach for most people. So, but we do have this structure that we use, the RAG structure, that makes it possible to create a model that's personalized to you. I was just talking to somebody who created what he calls the Shaft model, and it's reference to the movie Shaft that may predate many people on this call. But anyway, it has all of his writing. So he wants the model to be able, when he wants it to create, maybe not the whole thing, but if he's doing a blog post, it can create the blog post in his voice, and then he can kind of go in and edit it.
Fantastic. And I do remember the movie Shaft. So fantastic. So someone asked about, they're interested in knowing what are some current challenges that Latimer faces? Are there any foreseeable challenges in the future as we move forward? And as someone in the data science field, do you have advice on how to pivot into this field? You've done it so successfully. And I think you're just a true role model for how to pivot into the field and create, I think, a wonderful product. So do you have advices for the rest? I know that's a lot of questions in one.
There's a ton of challenges. One challenge is that seemingly every month the underlying technology evolves. Just today I was reading, OpenAI has released another model. So there's always a question of, what do we want to use and what does it cost to update our foundation model. Also, and the features that people expect, like I said, we're launching speech to text and text to speech next week. I think people just kind of expect that now. There's a big challenge, I think, in terms of keeping a black and brown or inclusive model trained. There's a what is our data source? We've talked to universities, that in some cases have millions of pages that are not scanned. So a lot of our history as Black and brown people, and a lot of our culture is not AI ready. And that's not just a problem for us, that's a problem for every model. And it's a problem because we want the models, all of the models, really to be inclusive and to be, great resources for us. So, one of the core issues is getting all of that data into AI scanned. Um, I would say data analytics is a great place to be, has a natural position within AI. It's just maybe what you're measuring is changing, but it's not, anything that we're looking at, let's say, on the analytics side for Latimer, is not that far off of what you're already working on. We want to know, a lot of your interaction now is with speech and text. So a lot of our, analytics are around, well, what are the topics that our folks are asking about? What's the frequency? Is there some sort of geographical distribution to what people are talking about, or their patterns? You can kind of see, we always have seen that there's our, recommendation engines. Hey, you asked about this, maybe this is interesting. So, creating those connections. Hey, you asked 5 questions about this, maybe this piece of content that we went and grabbed from the internet, it's not something you asked about, but maybe it's something that you're interested in, because quite frankly, what we want to do is we want to keep you in our environment, right? So everybody's, all websites basically want to have this kind of time on site, like how much time did this consumer spend with us? And part of that is, can we really, other than the questions you ask, can we find some way to kind of engage you?
Very cool. Very cool. And so someone asked, how can our HBCUs, our historically Black colleges and universities, utilize AI to help institutions in this digital transformation to create smarter learning environments for our students and also efficient business practices in administration?
There's a lot of people working on all of those questions. We're focused on kind of the student interaction more than the administrative. There are some young companies that are looking at using AI. It can greatly enhance the efficiency, I think, of educational institutions and maybe free up some resources that can be used elsewhere. And, we need a lot of smart people, like people, here, to figure out, we have some gaps, let's say, in reading. Can AI really, I was talking to this Columbia professor the other day who felt that, really wealthy students, can get whatever tutor they want. And so you have this disparity that's built in. And, can AI maybe close that gap? Can we have tutoring that's really compelling? So it's not just, hey, you don't have the resources for this person, but we're just going to give you this. But maybe AI can be a very insightful tool in terms of filling in the gaps, understanding what you know, understanding what you need to learn, finding interesting ways to teach you those things.
Fantastic. My kid is I didn't do it, data science major at Xavier in New Orleans. She uses AI tutoring, and she has told me, she's not gonna like me for saying this, but she's told me that it gives a better explanation, understanding than the professor, because it really kind of follows the students and follows their learning progression. So that's a great example. And I know somebody told me the haves and the have-nots. It's the have AI versus not having AI will be the next, we'll say, divide if it isn't with us already. Right. So yeah, very interesting. And so I know somebody put a request
Great,
for
100%.
information. Yeah, you agree. Sometimes I agree with the kid. Uh, somebody asked about the data challenge. Let me know, reach out. I put a link to our events in the chat. So if you check out our events page on our website, there is a data challenge application, and the program coordinator is Jamal Ware. And for the data challenge, you can reach out to him, jware@aucenter.edu. That's jware@aucenter.edu. So connect with him to get more information on the data challenge. And thanks, Adrian, for dropping that in the chat. So with all of this AI moving forward, how do we keep up with it in the classroom in preparing AI skilled students? Because as the workforce evolves, there's going to be a demand to be able to use AI as a tool, and also on the other side, the creator side, to create the tools of AI. So how do we, on the educator side, how do we keep up with all of this?
Oh, that's a question, huh? I think you kind of know the answer. You're going to have to dive in. I think using AI is pretty fun. You can have open-ended conversations really about any topic with it. Unlike search, which is just like kind of transactional and a one-step process, right? You can kind of go as deep as you want on a lot of different topics with AI. And so that's it, is using it. And there are so many newsletters that will keep you kind of informed about what's going on. There are so many newsletters about new technologies. I think every week you see something new and the ability to create images or films or, what have you. So you're going to have to, take a look at some of those.
I think that's great. And I think we'll end with that to just to do a little prompt engineering to prompt everybody just to dive into AI, play around with it. I find it fun just to kind of see what it can do with some prompts and what it can generate and what it can't do. And sometimes I like to create content and then see if the AI tool that created it knows that AI was used to generate it. Of course, it can't tell between human and AI, but that's all the fun of it. So I totally agree. Dive into AI, play around, figure it out, and also, help support students and researchers who are the creators of these AI tools. And thank you, John, for your work in really bringing, I think, important AI tools into the educational system to enhance learning, and also for your work in partnership with HBCUs.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So
Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you around.
thanks.